Howdy, boys and girls, and welcome to week 3 of the Carla and Krabby Show, or as it exists in my world, week 1 of the real college football season. We'll get to that in a moment. Carla, how you doing?
Not too bad. How are you?
I am doing really well, and I might be a little excited about this coming weekend. Again,
just a little bit.
We'll talk about that at length. I did one. Last weekend was as odd, quirky as we kind of expected. What did anything stuck out for you? What did you learn last weekend?
Well, I mean, the first obvious thing, since I went on a long rant about it last week, was, bummed about Ohio State. Sorry, bummed about Penn State. See, we never talk about Penn State anymore on this show because and so I've just gotten used to it. It was a good game. I watched most of that game.
Yeah.
Happy to see it was a close game. Happy to see that rivalry kind of feeling brought back. By the play on the field, not what was happening elsewhere. So that was good. I think we'll see that game be even more intense next year when it moves back to Beaver Stadium. So that's good, and I'm happy that rivalry is back. Gives you something to look forward to, even if your team isn't necessarily. A bowl game is a good season this year for Penn State. Even better if that game is somewhere near New Year's Day. So if that's your expectation, that was a good game.
That was a fun day here, and I was just kind of involved tangentially, but it was fun to see Pittsburgh be a college football town for a couple of days, and some of that's just the accident of the Steelers opening on the road on Monday night. It's not in the same weekend, so everyone's attention was kind of devoted to that game, and that was as a college football fan, first and foremost, that was a pretty cool thing to see.
And largest crowd ever at Heinz Field.
Yep. Largest crowd ever for a sporting event in the city of Pittsburgh.
Wow. Yeah, that would have been crazy. I mean, we didn't get a good feel for that on the national broadcast. I don't know how that felt. I mean, obviously you got a closer feel for it for being there, but from the national broadcast, it didn't feel like it was any bigger than a normal Pitt game, just because of the way the camera angles are set up. And I guess it's still weird to see games that early, because we get so used to seeing the Steelers in primetime because, TV execs love to put them there.
Who's this we that you're talking
about? Everybody but you.
I'm sorry. My quarterback is my NFL quarterback's dead already.
Already.
Week
1, you're already. Well, that was fun.
Yep, that was good.
Wait till next year. But anyhow, so that was it was good to see that rivalry back in action. But I think the most entertaining and the most ridiculous game of the week was Central Michigan, Oklahoma State, for 2 reasons. One, because Mike Gundy still has that gosh awful mullet. It hasn't gone away yet. And 2, because that ending was just bizarre. Yep. And the fact that it never should have happened in the first place was kind of weird. But yeah, that was, you kept waiting last week for like that shoe to drop. For like these weeks like that is usually when all the crazy happens. And that was really the only crazy that happened. There weren't a lot of out of the ordinary things. And it is an early game, so it's like, oh, the crazy's over this weekend. I was actually impressed with how Gundy handled it. Given his penchant for ranting and I'm a man, I'm 40 and blah 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 blah. He seemed to handle that, at least in the public eye, very, very well. Maybe even better than most people would expect, because clearly the officials were in the wrong. And he took a lot of that on himself. He's like, my team should not have been in that position. So that was a cool thing. Cool. Yeah. Did you learn anything else?
Did I learn anything else? I learned mostly that I'm ready for this weekend, actually.
That it rained in Columbus? You learned that it rained in Columbus.
It rained in Columbus. I was that was kind of a frustrating first half until the very end, and we got the defense. They got a couple defensive scores, and then things kind of turned around again. But as I said, for the third time now, we're going to get to that in a second.
Other thing we learned this week: Colossus didn't fall.
Yes, I did. I did not watch a ton of that game, but to see the opening and see just how freaking big that place is. I mean, I've watched NASCAR races at Bristol. In fact, that's like the one track where I was like, oh yeah, I'll sit down and watch this for a minute. And it doesn't look in the context of racing, it doesn't look that big. I mean, it's a racing, but you put a football field in the middle of that thing. And then it's like, oh yeah, there's like 8 million people in that. And that scoreboard, good Lord, that thing is enormous.
Yeah, that was like that's being suspended by cables. And we were talking before we started recording that there was a really bad storm that blew straight through Nashville about 4 hours before kickoff, heading directly for East Tennessee.
Yes.
And so when, we were watching the radar and we're like, oh, good grief, those 65-mile-an-hour winds, this could get ugly really quickly. But they got the game in before the rain hit. So,
yes.
But I heard traffic was a disaster trying to get out of there. When you got 150,000 people in there, it was just apparently a mess. But really cool atmosphere for a game.
Yeah. I was happy I was watching it on TV instead of being there and being stuck in Bristol for a couple days. But very cool thing to see. This week, we don't actually have to look for kind of contrived things like NASCAR tracks.
And mullets?
Or mullets and bad officiating. We have several good, really solid matchups among top 25 teams, and we've picked out 3 that we're gonna work on here. And the day starts off pretty solidly, pretty early with number 2 Florida State at number 10, Louisville. Florida State's a 2 to 3 point favorite. What I've seen, we're taping this on Tuesday night, so that could fluctuate a little bit. What do you think?
Well, the first thing when I saw the schedule for this week, and the first thing I asked my husband was, "How is this game at noon?" Like, I mean, this game, it's such a big game. You got 2 top 10 teams playing each other in a game that was going to have huge implications for the postseason.
And a really big freaking deal for Louisville. I saw on ESPN earlier tonight, as I was just kind of putzing around, that this is only the second top 10 matchup they've played in Cardinal Stadium since 2006.
Wow.
So it does not happen there very often.
And the atmosphere is an interesting thing in this game because game day is going there for the first time.
Yep.
So not only do you have this situation where you've got the number 2 team in the nation coming in, to face an offense that's absolutely rolling right now. I'll talk about that in a second. But to have the students amped up, heading from game day directly into the game, that's a unique thing. And so I think that's really going to kind of help with that atmosphere. Louisville's offense has been putting up like video game numbers in the first 2 weeks. Lamar Jackson has run out. That quarterback has run out kind of literally to lead the Heisman race at this point in the season. Now, yes, we're 2 weeks in. Okay, so let's hold back on that just a little bit. But I mean, it's hard to argue right now at this point in the season that he's one of the if not the best player in the country right now. He's averaging. I saw this. As I was prepping. He's averaging 507 yards per game himself.
Yes,
which is better than 97 other entire teams. Mm-hmm. In the first 2 weeks of the season, which is just crazy. And so then you flip the conversation. You start talking about Florida State, and we add this to the name list. DeAndre Francois. I mean, we talked about him in week 1. He looked solid in week 1 after he woke up. Did what he had to do last week. Mm-hmm. So he's proven himself. Big question for Florida State in this is defense because they just lost Derwin James, their safety, arguably one of the best players on the team, out maybe as long as 7 weeks. The good news is it's not a tear, but hurt his knee, should be back later in the season. But that's a huge loss, and it's already kind of a questionable secondary for Florida State. And you lose your key safety and going up against a top 10 team that has the capability of the deep threat. That's a really, really interesting matchup. So you've got that, strength on what could be a perceived weakness. We don't know a lot about the Cardinals defense yet because they haven't really played anybody. So that's another big question is, can the Cardinals defense stop Dalvin Cook? If the Cardinals defense can stop Dalvin Cook, I don't know how you pick against this Louisville offense right now. I really don't. Until somebody can prove that they can stop them, they're the best offense in the country. And playing at home in front of a hyped up crowd, I'm gonna pick the upset in this. I think Louisville wins. I think it's gonna be one heck of a football game. And if neither team can play defense, this is gonna be the first team to 100 wins. But which is possible in this game. We don't know. But yeah, I don't know. Gut says Louisville wins this game.
Okay. I'm going the same way. And I'll tell you why. Actually, I looked and I was expecting to come up with something completely different. I looked at defensive numbers for both teams. And again, this is a tough thing to put a ton of credence in after only 2 games in the season. Florida State and Louisville are tied at 53rd best in the country for scoring defense, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing. Now, 2 very different routes getting there, and I understand that Florida State's played a top 25 SEC team. Louisville has not. I watched, and the thing about comparing competition is really valid. Obviously, I watched the first half of Louisville at Syracuse last weekend. And again, I mean, you mentioned, it's like watching a video game when you watch Lamar Jackson. Just so impressive, so good. But he's playing against a better defense this week than he's seen so far. Without Derwin James, that's a dicey thing for the Seminoles. And if they have, I remember the year that Jameis Winston was the quarterback for Florida State, and you and I mention this every week for weeks. It's like one of these weeks this is going to bite them. This thing where they don't show up in the first half and then come back in the second. It's going to, and it never did. And that could be the case with Francois and Florida State again this year. But I think just everything stacks up in Louisville's favor. They have the hot quarterback in the country. And by the way, this is the 3rd week of the show for the season. I'm going to mention my 3rd Heisman candidate, my 3rd Heisman front runner. But I mean, after watching Lamar Jackson, there's no way, and actually digging into the numbers, there's no way you can't actually call him the front runner at this point. But at home, national attention, top 10 ranking. I think this stacks up for the Cardinals. And the over/under, maybe I didn't look this up. Maybe it's 80, something like that. Be. But I see this as just going to be entertaining as hell, and I saw Louisville pulling off this upset.
So I was going to say, so make your notes now.
Yes.
Get up early on Saturday. Mm-hmm. Get your coffee.
Yes.
And be settled in on the couch. See, that's an 11 East. That's an 11 Central kick for us.
Oh, ouch. Okay.
Yeah, so that's still a morning game. So get up, get settled, get your spot on the couch. Mm-hmm. Don't miss that game. That's
Gotcha. I'm going to go to yoga and then go to Just Good Donuts on Carson Street in Pittsburgh. Have some breakfast and then come back and I'll be ready to go for that.
You'll be in good shape. Yep.
Yeah. We skip most of Saturday afternoon because there are 2 monster games Saturday evening. The next one we talk about is in South Bend at 7:30. Number 12 Michigan State at number 18 Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a 7.5 point favorite in this one. What do you think?
Can I call this game the put up or shut up game?
Yes.
Because that's really what it feels like. I'm not just saying that because these are 2 teams that, being Big Ten, our Big Ten allegiances aside here, these are 2 teams that at certain points during the year we go, eek. Yep. But in this particular matchup, these are 2 teams that could be national contenders, could play a role in the playoff, or they could be totally out. And we're going to find out a lot about both of these 2 teams in this game. Notre Dame was on the losing end of that crazy, ridiculous game in week 1 against Texas, right, which is probably – that game is going to be tough to beat as being one of the most entertaining games of the year. Mm-hmm. And the offense – the Notre Dame offense looked good in that game. Deshaun Kaiser threw 5 touchdown passes. Right. So that was just a good football game that came down to the very end. 2 evenly matched teams. Notre Dame just happened to lose the game. I don't think they had anything that really stood out as being a weakness, despite that loss. Then they did what they were supposed to do against Nevada last week. And this is one of those times where you look at the score of the game last week, and it's incredibly deceiving because it looks like Nevada was in that game, and they really weren't. If you go back through and look at the box score, Notre Dame was up big time, blanking Nevada until the fourth quarter. So that game wasn't as close. So this is Notre Dame team that's kind of, feeling itself out and now knows that it's got another big time test this weekend. What's interesting about Michigan State is there were questions about them heading into the year to begin with, whether or not they would be able to kind of live up to this national reputation that they've had the last several years. And then they went out and just kind of decided maybe not to completely show up against Furman in week 1.
Right.
And it was just they let Furman hang around. It was like 21-13 in the fourth, and they just couldn't shut the door. And the other thing that's interesting about this particular matchup is that the Spartans have had a long time to think about this. They haven't played since September 2nd, which was Friday night of opening weekend. Yep. So is that a good thing or a bad thing when you've got a team that kind of was off to a slow start? Would it have been better for them to play last week to kind of, maybe solve some of the problems that they had against Furman? You say that they've got an experienced guy under center, even though this is kind of his first year of starting. Tyler O'Connor, was behind Cook for all those years. He's a fifth-year senior. He's got some experience there. And the defense
got to see plenty of him last night.
Yeah. And the defense should still be good, but we don't know because the only team they've played is Furman. And they didn't do a great job in stopping Furman. So what does this game mean? Who knows in this game? I mean, I think if you look at results alone, Notre Dame is the favorite. I think that line is about right. But the game's on the road. And we know how Notre Dame plays on the road, So I'm going to say that Notre Dame wins this game. But I'm not I don't feel real confident in that pick because we know absolutely nothing about it, Michigan State. But based purely on results so far this season, you've got to believe that Notre Dame is the stronger team in this. But who knows?
I would have no hesitation in picking Notre Dame. Actually, if it had not been for my recollection of Michigan State's game in Columbus last fall. And Tyler O'Connor was part of a two-headed quarterback team that gave a pretty good Ohio State defense fits. And Michigan State's defense that day was as good as Ohio State saw the entire year. Gave Ohio State's offense fits as well, and they ended up winning that on the last minute field goal. I have the same questions you do. I mean, we don't have any idea. Furman is not a test. This might as well be the season opener for Michigan State.
Right.
For Furman, for all intents and purposes, is a scrimmage, something you did in the preseason, and it really was. I mean, it seems like it was a month ago. And I know it's just a couple of weeks, but that is forever, especially just in the beginning of a season. And Notre Dame, particularly on the offense, I mean, we have a pretty solid idea of what we're getting. Sean Kaiser is I'm not going to elevate him to the Heisman level.
Yeah.
But he has been really good. And the Irish's offense is something that I would give them, keep them in most games. I would have said the same thing, when Michigan State goes into Columbus last night. So that's where my hang up is. If Notre Dame can't score, more than 21 or something like that, I give Michigan State a really good shot at winning this. I think, however, again, because it's just that it's such an odd way for Michigan State to start the season, I'm going to give Notre Dame the edge here. I wouldn't even think they would cover the 7.5 point spread. I think it's going to be tight, but and again, if we get into the fourth quarter and you're looking at something that's like 17-14, then make sure you're watching because that could be a fun one. Except I won't be watching because I'm going to be watching the other game.
Yeah, you've got another thing to watch.
I think that's going to be a tight ball game, and I'm just based on what we know and what we don't know.
Crazy things happen in East Lansing after dark.
Yes, they do. Yes.
You know, and this is a night game. It'll take till the second half before it's really dark, but you know, that's a tough environment.
Now, I say you don't know until you know, and after Saturday we're going to know about my Buckeyes. Number 3 Ohio State at number 14 Oklahoma. Ohio State is anywhere. I've seen lines from 1.5 to 3 point favorites. What do you think?
You're gonna make me go first because I know you have things in mind. So,
just gonna talk about that.
Okay. So here's the interesting thing. So yes, the line is that Ohio State is the favorite in this game on the road. However, if you go to ESPN and you look at their game cast, they have Oklahoma with the edge, which is interesting. Which goes to show you how evenly matched this game really could be. Yeah. Between these two teams. I'll start with Oklahoma first because I want to essentially go back to week 1 and take everything that I said about Houston and now say it about Oklahoma. Okay. Because this is the situation now that Oklahoma finds itself in. Just like Houston in week 1, this was you must win this game, otherwise if you get to the postseason, people will say, yeah, but you lost to Oklahoma. Oklahoma is now in that same spot. They have their yeah, but loss already. Yeah. They can't have 2. Regardless of whether they run the table in the Big 12. If they have a loss against Houston and a loss against Ohio State, sure. Not going to happen unless some crazy thing happens. So this is a tremendously big game for Oklahoma. Baker Mayfield and company rebounded very nicely against the Cupcake last week. Kind of got things back in working order. But you look at that first week game because it's really tough, to go through this. Again, looking at last week's stats because it was Louisiana Monroe, I think. So a lower conference competition here. But you go back and you look at that thing, and you look at the stats in the Houston game, and they're almost identical between the two teams. I mean, like within 10 yards of total offense of each other. Wow. Okay. So then it's like, okay. So what was the difference in this game? In that game in particular, there were 2 things in particular. Turnovers. Oklahoma turned the ball over 3 times, one of which led directly to a touchdown. Time of possession, which Houston dominated. So Houston dominated the time of possession, forced turnovers, and then they got that, wacky kick 6. And those things lined up to lead to that 10-point win. So that's the formula for success for your Buckeyes. Dominate the time of possession. Force Oklahoma into a couple of turnovers. Maybe you get lucky a couple of times and get some of the, get a fluke play here or there. But that's got to be the recipe for success because this offense can fire on all cylinders if it gets going. And for your Buckeyes, defense was the question heading into the season. And so that's got to be a little bit of a point of concern there that if Oklahoma gets going on, that's going to be a really big test for that defense. But you've got experience on offense, so I still lean Ohio State in this game if they can follow that formula of dominating time of possession, which sometimes Ohio State doesn't do all that well. Right. Sometimes they score quickly and give the ball, and if you're scoring touchdowns, then okay, then time of possession doesn't matter. But if you're not scoring touchdowns and you're taking these quick short drives and giving the ball back to the Sooners, that could be the recipe for success for Oklahoma. So I think offensive sustainability throughout is going to be really, really key. Instead of having your defense win the game for you, I think Ohio State might actually almost need its offense to win the game for them. Which is fine in your book, I'm sure.
It's supposed to be how that works. It's supposed to be.
Your thoughts?
The thing that you mentioned about what Ohio State's defense needs to do, and this struck me as a good sign because I obviously noticed turnovers against Houston that Oklahoma had. Ohio State is tied. I was looking this up. Ohio State is tied for first in the country with 7 interceptions already this season.
Okay.
3 of those have been run back for touchdowns.
Nice.
In addition to that, there are 2 fumble recoveries. So that's a pretty good takeaway number for after 2 games of a college football season. Obviously, this is a different level offense, different level quarterback that we're talking about. Tulsa's quarterback made one particularly awful throw right at the end of the first half in Columbus last weekend when it was raining. He gave his receiver, he overthrew him by a mile, and it was actually a fairly easy run back for a score. So the turnovers that's something that works in our favor. Mayfield can scramble. Mayfield can move. That requires some discipline. Fortunately, there is some experience in the front 7. Sam Hubbard played most of the year last year as a first-year starter, and he's back in the defensive line. Raekwon McMillan is one of the better middle linebackers in the Big Ten. That's going to be helpful in having discipline of containing a quarterback who moves well. I think the biggest thing that's going to make a difference here, and this is, I may have mentioned this a week ago, I have been really impressed so far this season with, for years you talk about, you name a guy and you say, okay, Urban finally has his Percy Harvin at Ohio State. And it seems like this year he has not 1 but 2. We've been waiting for the Dontre Wilson to kind of come alive, and he's had injury problems so far this season. He has been solid returning kicks and working as a guy basically mostly out of the slot. And Curtis Samuel can play tailback, can play wideout, can play in the slot, can play H-back. And this is something that we have not seen in Urban's offense. In the national championship season, it was, especially in the postseason of that year, it was tailback and it was long throws. And this is a very different offense. Although we still have the long ball is still there, and there's a very talented group of young wide receivers who are making that part of the offense work. But the unpredictability of Curtis Samuel and Dontre Wilson adds so much to that offense. I think that's where the advantage is going to be on Saturday. It can be a possession offense. I mean, we have Mike Weber is also a solid tailback. He's just been really good so far, and I think he's going to work out to be kind of the possession guy that Urban likes to have. Urban has shown he's like to have. That's going to be. I think that's going to be the difference there. 1.5 points to 3-point favorite. And I heard it. I mean, it could be that tight. I mean, this is a night game on the road against a tough non-conference opponent. But this is not a homer pick out of me. But I'm thinking Ohio State. This is something that my Buckeyes can do. There you go.
It'll definitely, yeah. There you go. Gosh, and that's another tough environment to go into and playing a night game in Norman. I mean, that's crazy. But yeah, we're going to find a lot out about both of these defenses. Mm-hmm. And that's been the question for both of these teams is, can they stop the run? I think Ohio State can stop the run, whether or not they can, make sure they defend the deep ball because, like you said, Mayfield has the capability of throwing it deep. So it's kind of like 2 different pieces of the defense. Ohio State needs to be able to stop the deep ball. Oklahoma needs to be able to stop the run, which they've done okay so far this year, but not to the extent that we're used to seeing from Oklahoma. So yeah, this might be whoever has the ball last wins the game kind of thing. It would be fun. It will be fun. Yeah. Yeah, so get up early to watch Louisville and Florida State, and then make sure that you've had enough caffeine or take a nap. But yeah, you got Alabama Ole Miss in there too. You didn't even talk about it.
I'm taking it.
You can watch the first half. Give me over by half.
Oh, it's going to be a fun one, boys and girls. So make sure you're in front of your TVs at noon, and make sure you're watching the correct game at 7:30. I'll leave that up to you as to decide which game.
Trigger finger on the thumb.
Oh yeah, you can do that. If you got two TVs, that's cool. Totally acceptable. Stream one on your laptop, no big deal. Carla, thank you very much.
Yep, thanks as always.
Guys, it's going to be fun. We will talk about all this stuff next week and more games to come, I'm sure. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.